Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Keys webinar on convergent commerce. It is shopping time this month. In many places we hear about Double 11, about Black Friday, so it seems like the perfect moment to reflect on how we shop, on how the boundaries between online and offline in-store are blurring, and how the roles of different channels are morphing to adapt to new consumer behaviors, new consumer needs. So on the agenda for you today, we first have, as usual, Simon, who will share his much expected update on global public opinion. And he will also share an update on the resources that Ipsos has available for you all. After that, Alison Chaltas will invite us to embrace the convergence, to effectively connect with consumers and to make sure that they have the best shopping experiences. Then Patrick will be our guide for an exciting tour, a flash tour of China, and he will introduce us to the very latest shopping news, including Double 11 events and also some very cool new mechanisms for delivery. And finally, in the retail conversation, Alan will tell us what the social buzz is, what people are talking about online, what they're discussing about cost of living, about shopping experiences, because he and his team have analyzed millions of social media conversations. And the good news is that at the end of the session, we will also have a little time for Q&A. So please don't hesitate to use the box and to type your questions. Simon will be looking at the box and he will be conveying these questions at the end to our experts. And with that, I will pass over to Simon to start our session.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Today being getting close to the end of the year, so I thought I'd start perhaps with reflecting on the last 12 months as we think about what's happened in our experiences all the way around the world. Coming back to this question of what people are worrying about in their country and looking about it over time, it's quite quick to see the experience that we've seen around the world writ large on this graph. A tale of not one crisis, but of many crises. Permacrisis, polycrisis, these are some of the words being used to describe our current environment. Our story of public opinion this year is the story of coronavirus falling quite quickly from being the top thing that's been worrying people around the world, and the rise, of course, of inflation, bit by bit, month by month, raising new questions about those topics, those worries that didn't go away in the middle of the chart, for example, around unemployment and around inequality. So we've got much to think about. One thing to think about if you've got a very eagle eye is you'll notice on the right hand side of the chart is that the latest data, which we're releasing next week, is flat. And so this is the first time for 16 months that the percentage worrying about inflation hasn't risen. It's clearly too soon perhaps to say we've reached peak inflation, but maybe we can start to consider the question. Similarly, if we look at consumer confidence, it's not really a particularly enjoyable set of data to look at. The best we can say is that global consumer confidence shows stability. And if we look at the details of that in the middle of the chart, it doesn't take long to remind ourselves that the essentials of consumer confidence, as felt by people around the world, are in a worse state, shall we say, than it was before the pandemic started in the early part of 2020. If I draw your attention also, of course, thinking about this year, I think one of the things to remind ourselves is that 16 of the countries on our chart are showing lower scores than they were in the earlier parts of the year before, for example, the war in Ukraine. So what does this tell us? Well, one of the things it's told us is that Europe is one of the parts of the world which has been particularly noticeable when we've been looking at this declining confidence and concerns about the current state of play. This question asks people to tell us what they think about the state of the economy in their country right now. Is it good? Is it poor? And if you look at these three countries I'm going to share with you now, you'll notice the fall in Germany, the fall in Sweden, the fall in the Netherlands. And again, if you have an eagle eye, you'll notice that the most recent data is showing a very small uptick. Too early to say that we're now starting to look up. The economic predictions don't look great, but certainly a position, at least for a moment, of at least maybe some stability, possibly. So what about this month? Well, one of the big uncertainties, of course, we have is around climate change. That's one of the 3 events of the month I'm going to reflect on and think about perhaps where the public mood might be in relation to each of those topics, because it perhaps tells us something about how our organisations might need to respond to these different questions, or can build a better understanding on these questions. Now, when we think about the COP summit, it's taking place in Egypt at the moment. Of course, the precursor to that was the extremely worrying news from the UN at the end of last month, where they say there is no credible pathway to achieving increases in temperatures of below 1.5 degrees centigrade. That was the aspiration at the Paris summit some years ago, and the UN, who I don't think are necessarily sensationalist in their press releases, put out a very downbeat press release there. Now, we've done a survey to accompany the COP study, the COP summit, sorry. It tells us that people are willing to accept a whole range of policies encouraging sustainable technology, or encouraging changing product pricing to make environmentally friendly products cheaper, or to give incentives for investing in green financial products. Perhaps where the study gets more interesting, though, is at the lower end of this chart. We've asked about a whole range of potential interventions and policies, and these are 3 at the bottom of the chart. And I think one of the points to underline is that on these quite tension-filled topics around banning petrol and diesel-powered vehicles from the cities, or higher taxes on red meat or dairy products, or higher taxes on non-renewable energy, it's quite a varied picture. It's certainly the case that significant numbers of people are now ready to engage with these questions and what they might mean for our lives and our behaviours and our experiences. But of course, many people are opposed to these as well. And our team has been trying to look in a bit more detail now at this topic. And we've got a new report out this week looking at who cares about the environment and trying to think about the segmented landscape that's out there in terms of how consumers, citizens, people, customers, voters, however we classify people, where their heads are. They've identified 5 different segments, from the disengaged denialists to the activists, and started to think about who they are, how they see the world, and how we as businesses or as organizations, as governments, can communicate well with them in our work to develop a more sustainable future for us all. Second thing happening this month is lots going on online. Now, we're going to talk about this more as we go through the webinar, our offline and online worlds, but we certainly have much to think about in terms of the digital environment over the last month. And in preparing for this webinar, we noticed a particularly useful study that perhaps frames some of our thinking as we look ahead to next year. Trust in the internet has dropped significantly since 2019. This is a 20-country study. And in preparing for the webinar, we've been discussing this as it relates to commerce and shopping and retail, because if trust in the internet is down in many countries around the world, privacy being a big concern, governance being a big concern, what markers might that put for us if we're trying to trade and do business with people online? And it might translate to quite fundamental questions about whether people are happy about giving credit cards or personal detail online. So that trust in the internet study is one that colleagues on the call might want to delve deeper into during the coming period. We thought that was an interesting one to flag today. The third thing to flag today, of course, is the World Cup, which those of you who are following it will know it starts on Sunday. Those of you who follow Ipsos won't be surprised to know we've done a study on the World Cup, and it shows that Brazil are the favourites when we ask people around the world. Those of you listening from Brazil. 66% of you expect your country to be the winners. But it also, I guess, sets in train some thinking more broadly, even for those of us who aren't soccer or sports fans, around brands and around nations as brands. And we've got an interesting new study out that looks at that topic head on in relation to how people view countries around the world. It shows Germany finishing top again on the leaderboard, with Japan and Canada being on the podium as well. And the methodology follows a similar kind of approach to those of us who are looking at brands and trying to profile the strengths and weaknesses of the brands that we're involved in or that we're trying to sell or to build in the broader environment. My own country, the UK, regrettably, at least for those of us living in the UK, has dropped out of the top 5 for the first time ever. It's taken a hit on governance, and it's taken a hit on the welcoming nature of its people, and as a result, its image is falling down. So an interesting topic to perhaps reference as we think more broadly about what brand success might mean in the period ahead. So all of the resources are available to you on our webinar homepage, and I hope there's something useful for you in your own work to delve into deeper as you look to the period ahead. But for now, I hand back to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Simon, for this great snapshot, reminding us of lots of the important stuff that is going on, and also for your generosity in sharing all the access to all the great resources that we have. So now we're going to dive into a topic that you touched on briefly, which is the whole commerce one, and very keen to hear from Alison how we should embrace convergence. Alison, over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be back for our 3rd annual Keys event around Shopper. Today, I'm going to talk about embracing convergent commerce, and that's really about shifting our mindset of retail and shopping as a place or an activity to one that's fully integrated in everything shoppers do and their own personal ecosystems. So let me first start with an understatement. There is no doubt commerce is evolving rapidly. Technology's changed absolutely everything. We've all pretty much moved beyond the world of multi-channel, where we had e-commerce and large format and traditional trade, all as separate silos, and we're very transaction oriented, to a world where we've started to aspire, at least, to seamless handoffs from one channel and one touch point to another. The focus has been on frictionless and functional experiences, and we've gotten really quite good at it in many, many categories and brands. But that's not enough for where the consumer is going. We need to move into this world of convergent commerce and think as marketers and merchants. How do we leverage the channel explosion that's driven by technology? And think about this convergence of physical and digital environments and touch points. So that's channels and marketing vehicles crossing over in a way that truly blends sales and marketing like we haven't seen before. Let's take a look at some of the data behind this. Emerging and scaling commerce channels are moving mainstream. And what you'll see here is ongoing tracking of all kinds of digital channels. And you'll see that the dark ones at the top are what we talk about as traditional e-commerce, a marketplace, a retail website, a brand website. And pretty much everyone, particularly in China, the number on the right, but even in the dark blue bars, the vast majority of the world is using these channels on a regular basis. But what's really amazing is the light blue set of bars and the growth of all kinds of new channels: social, quick, live stream, voice, AR, VR, even meta commerce. Consumers are experimenting and starting to learn how to use these technologies. And while still a small percentage of sales, we know that will continue to grow. And all you have to do is look at that live stream number. 35% of the world has experimented with live stream retail, but 74% of those in China have used it. I won't go deeper into that because Patrick will in a few minutes. So in the meantime, the physical store is still there. And I get asked all the time, is the physical store dead? What's going to happen to retail? And the answer is no, the physical store is not dead. People are starting to come back from our gap of shopping, if you will, during the pandemic. You see some data here on different categories. Electronics, we're coming back less than we are, say, in food. That's a logical sense. But what we're really finding is that consumers are using retail in very different ways, and retailers are responding by redefining what a store really is. And what that means is it's no longer just about sales and sales per square foot, as I like to say, or per square meter. It's so much more. It's the role of the store in the total marketing mix and the total supply chain. So that could be functional, it could be pickup, click and collect, different technologies we've gotten so accustomed to in the last couple of years. This example from a Pudo pickup in 7-Eleven Japan, wouldn't have expected those would become partners, but they have, and it's great use of the real estate, and it's a great safe way for the e-commerce players to deliver their products. It's also stores are also being used for returns, for servicing, for co-creation and cooking and refilling recyclable containers and so many different functional ways. Probably a little more exciting is the experiential use of stores. And L'Oreal's flagship store in Shanghai is a great example of a really inspiring people in a beautiful way that fits with their brand and bringing in senses and tangibility and also convenience. If you want something for this weekend, it's much easier to go to a store than trust that the delivery is going to be there. But it's really more experiential than it is about enjoying the shopping process. And one of the things that's interesting in this is it's particularly true in luxury, where we're really working to try to understand as an industry, how do we get people excited to enjoy that experience in store and to really bring people online with an experience as well. And then lastly, the human touch. Simple. We need people. We missed people in the pandemic. We want to connect. We want advice from that sales associate. You know, many clothing apparel stores like Nordstrom here in the US, a great example, really become a place where you go and have trust with the folks who work there, and they help you figure out what the best merchandise is, or maybe help you return what you bought that didn't look good and find something better. So all this talk about channels is really important, but we need to think about it in the context of the consumer, because she doesn't think about it in channels. She's thinking about what she wants, when she wants it, the easiest way or the most fun way to get it at a price that matters. So as you think then across that consumer, what's really happened is stores are not just a place, retail is not just a place, and journeys are not at all linear, but really more an ecosystem where consumers are bombarded with different forms of media, different channels, different information, so much of it word of mouth, and they are in control. And what we need to do is be where they are, when they are, 24/7. It's almost 24/7, 365. And how are we there in a way that constantly evolves with their needs? The thought of integrating into their ecosystem, becoming their go-to across all these different nodes is so important. And the way to do it is to think about that experience from a human side first, not just the tech, but the human element being at the center of what we do. So a few examples of that, and that ecosystem can come from a product standpoint, a sector standpoint, or a tech standpoint. Product-wise, the telco companies and the cell phone companies are perfect examples of this, where they've brought us into being loyal to one particular brand in their phone, their wearables, maybe their appliances in their smart homes, and it all starts to come together even in our cars, and we become very much a part of their ecosystem. They become a part of ours, and in the process, they learn everything about us. Sector expansion. These three great retailers are all examples of moving from where they started, right? Amazon started in books, and now they sell everything and are branching into physical stores. Loblaws is a great banker now, and pharmacy, and Walmart's leading in Walmart.com and selling other people's things on their website. All things that we probably wouldn't have imagined 10 years ago. The platforms are inventing every day. You think about what WeChat and Alibaba do, and you can buy your tickets, you can buy your clothes, you can book your car, and you can book your dinner all in one click pretty much. So it's an end-to-end ecosystem for consumers in almost any angle they want. So as we talk about keeping humans at the center, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. We need to build our commerce ecosystem around that person. Tech is the enabler. Don't get too excited about the tech. I love it. As you can see, I have a lot of passion for it, but the tech is the way we get to the consumer and connect with their ecosystem. Co-create with them, Make sure you're building in your marketing conversations and certainly social conversations you're building with them, but also product experiences and getting their data in so that you are really meeting their needs across all your different channels. And lastly, humanize the experiences. How can we be sensorial? I mentioned luxury a minute ago. We were talking in a roundtable yesterday about how can we get scent onto a mobile device so people can actually smell perfume while they're shopping from home. Those kinds of things are coming, and the sky's the limit as the tech evolves. So we also have to think about the context Simon started with, and this context creates worry. The biggest worry, of course, is inflation. When we think about that, retailers are responding very aggressively and creating new tactics, which we will be watching very carefully over the next 60 days to see how they play out. This example from a brilliant retailer, Target, here in the US, if you can't read it, it says 3 days to score early Black Friday deals, Thursday, October 6th through October 8th. That's a full 6 to 8 weeks ahead of the normal Black Friday, and a basket right there so you can get shopping right away. The implication of this context and these retailer tactics is consumers are cutting back, seeking low price products and channels, starting earlier for their pre-holiday sales. Lots of people I know are done shopping, and lots of stores are already out of stock. We're planning more, looking for deals, making sure we're getting the best value and what people really want, and doing more research. If we're going to buy less, we want it to be better and more thoughtful. And the other dynamic, which is pretty new, is people are putting things in their shopping cart, walking away, and then maybe coming back and maybe not, like we've never seen before. So it's something to think about. And once the product's in the cart, how do you get them to close the sale? So what? So what does this all mean? First of all, things keep changing, and this is a very exciting, evolving space. So you need to stay on top. We all need to stay on top of these changes, and we're trying here at Ipsos to continue to do studies. We launched one today on our website called The Morphing Store, and it's all about the evolution of brick and mortar in today's world. So staying on top of the data, the trends is critical, but then also thinking convergent first in all categories, be where they are at all times. Really define the role of each of these different channels and touch points individually and together, and think about them as supporting each other, not instead of each other. It's that ecosystem that really matters, and keeping it human is the closing thought that I'd like to leave you with. So thank you for your time. Back to you, Jennifer.
Sorry, I just realized I was on mute. I was saying that you did touch on the topic of inflation briefly. I was wondering, from what you are observing and the work that you do with all sorts of brands, how is this, this sort of change of behavior due to the concerns about cost of living? What does this then mean for brands? Can you expand a little bit on that topic?
Sure. I think for everyday brands, what we're seeing is, first of all, people are buying less. They're reducing the stockpiles they had in their house from the pandemic. They're thinking more choicefully about when a deal is happening in their categories. So we really need to be careful about aligning our promotion strategy and making sure that we're being choiceful about where we're reducing pricing. Price is not the only way to show value, even with an inflationary environment. The second thing is we got to be very cognizant of value brands and private label and understand the role of those, and creating a differentiation for if we are a global or national brand, make sure we stand out versus that private brand. And then the last thing I would say for those that are part of the holiday shopping season, and that includes, by the way, food and household products in many cases, people are going to buy less, but they're going to be more choiceful about what they buy, because I know I'm not going to serve cheaper food at my Thanksgiving dinner. I'm just going to maybe buy a little less and maybe skip a couple of the bells and whistles that I've done in the past. So different behaviors for different categories, but overall we're being more careful in our shopping.
But rooms for brands to play within this.
Rooms for brands to play with. This is not the end of the universe.
Right. Thank you so much, Alison. And now I think we're all very keen to go on our little China tour with Patrick. We're all very curious to discover the novelties that you're going to share with us, Patrick. Over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And hello, everyone. This is Patrick from Beijing, China. And I'm very glad to bring some latest updates from China. Actually, most of them happened in the past 2 weeks. So last week, as Alice mentioned and Jennifer mentioned, we had the largest shopping festival in China, which was the Double 11 shopping festival. However, probably this was the quietest Double 11 I ever remembered. On one hand, before the Double 11, we didn't actually see much advertising or media exposure at all. And on the other hand, for the first time in the past 10 years, China's largest e-commerce platforms, Tmall and JD.com, they didn't release any sales number, which is odd. And there were many different wild guesses about what the real sales number was. Some said it increased by 2%. Some others said it decreased by 70%, which I don't really believe. So we checked different sources of data, and most likely this is more close to the reality. So this data came from the Government Bureau of Statistics, and the packages delivered during the Double 11 time, which was about 11 days, dropped 11% compared to last year. So there is the possibility that this year's Double 11 sales number in China actually dropped. And if you attended our session last year, you would remember that we said live streaming was the new trend. And last year, we introduced the two major live streaming e-commerce KOLs of China, which is Austin Lee on the left and Via on the right. And this year, unfortunately, both were banned for quite a long time because of tax issues. However, Austin came back right in front of Double 11, right on time. And as a result, he again achieved an even more amazing number of $2 billion sales value only on the first night of Double 11 during that 8 or 9 hours. And if we say live streaming was the new trend, this year it is definitely the leading actor. So if we take a look at skincare sector, on the first day of Tmall sales, almost 70% of the sales came from Austin Lee, this one person and his team. And that's how how strong live streaming is today in China. But if live streaming is already the old trend in China, what is the new things going on, especially by the e-commerce platforms? Actually, they initiated some new technologies, especially in delivery. So this picture was taken in my living community, and actually you can see me in that picture. This is what we call a delivery pickup station. And nowadays you see these kind of stations all around the places, right outside the office buildings, inside or near your living communities. And the delivery man will leave the packages in those boxes. So as a pickup person, you have more flexibility of when to go to that station and pick up your stuff. And also you see these kind of things running in the building. So this video I shot in our office, and we have a lot of robots like this running in the office, very busy. So they are delivery robots. And if you have anything heavy, they can definitely take it to the elevator, come to your store, come to your floor, and then get it delivered for you. So those are the new technologies mostly initiated by the e-commerce companies. So how about other 2C brands? What are the brands doing? And the trend for the brands is mainly that they are really trying to push the orders online. They are really trying to push the digital orders. We take Starbucks as an example. So here's the screenshot of the Starbucks app in China. And the first section is order online and pick up at the store. The second section is order for delivery. So customers are really encouraged to order online. And as a result, almost 50% of the total bookings of Starbucks China in the past Q2 actually were mobile bookings. And 75% of their total orders were ordered by loyalty members. And if we think that this is already an amazing number, I think McDonald's actually pushed this even further by one step. So if you are at any of McDonald's store in China, there would be no one ordering for you in most cases. And you can either order on the app, on WeChat, or at the kiosk. And as a result, actually last year, almost 90% of their bookings were digital bookings. So those kind of trends didn't just happen in categories like fast food chain or coffee shops. they are also happening in places where probably least expected. For example, car sales. Here is the Audi app in China, and Psych Audi is the joint venture for Audi in China. Nowadays, if you are buying a new car at Psych Audi, you have to do almost everything on the app. So on the left, you can see the list of things you can do on the app, and except for test drive itself, everything else you can finish on the app. Actually, everything else you will have to finish on the app. That is, how extreme they are trying to push this. So why are brands trying so hard to push digital bookings? We see some obvious benefits for it. First of all, is the possibility for lower operational cost. You can rent a smaller location. You can have fewer staff at the counter or in the location. Starbucks even opened up a lot of locations with no seats and no cashier at all in China. The second is to improve the customer experience. Customers no longer wait in the line to order, and they have more time to read through the menu. They don't have to worry, about interruptions from other people, etc. But that is definitely helpful. Another side connected is upselling. We all know that the upselling is one important function of the counter. However, in the past, it can also be harmful to your customer experience. Right now, this can be done in a more, I would say, smarter way or efficient way. And you can have a jump out window right before the checkout process, and the system knows what you ordered or bought in the past, so it can recommend what you really want. Talking about efficiency, another thing is about marketing. Marketing people now have a stronger tool than ever, because whenever you have a new promotion or you have a new product launch, you can have it pushed, in the jump out window in the app or via the notification in the app. And last but not the least, for the first time, the brands are having a large number of purchase data and also behavior data of the customers. So with the help of experts like us, you can definitely analyze those data and make smarter decisions with smarter insights. Lastly, I want to talk about something I was asked a lot about China, which is about the dynamic zero COVID policy and what's going on with it. So to be honest, it had a strong impact on the economy and also the consumer confidence. However, only last week, a new version of policy was released. And for the first time, the term zero COVID policy was not mentioned. In the past week, a lot of changes happened. And right now, more people are believing that in Q2 and Q3 next year, maybe there would be some dramatic changes happening in China. So in the background, you can see a picture of Beijing Marathon, which only happened 2 weeks ago. No one was wearing a mask, and they were running in front of Tiananmen Square. So if we say the zero COVID policy is a marathon, maybe finally we are almost there in China. And thank you. Back to Jennifer.
Thank you, Patrick. And we all hope and wish that you've finished running your marathon very soon. Mm-hmm. Very insightful information that you shared there, and how brands are empowered through this D2C context. Really, really very relevant. And just to go a bit on the light side to finish this conversation, I was wondering, Patrick, if you showed so many changes that are happening in China, has anything changed for you over the past few months?
Yeah, I think, Ryan, I'm an even lazier consumer, I would say. So I ordered more things online. I ordered everything in last minute, and I have everything delivered to the office by the robot. And I even have a new habit, which is when I go to the office in the morning, I follow the robot because it knows which elevator arrives first. So that's how lazy I am using the new technologies.
And another good use for the robot, knowing which elevator arrives first. I like that one. Thank you so much, Patrick. And we will now move on to explore a little bit more what is going on in conversations online. So, Alan, what is the buzz? Very keen to hear from you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So let me look at this conversation through the lens of a survey that we've been doing globally and some social data, and sort of pick up this retail conversation specifically around the holidays. And This is a sneak peek at an annual study that we're doing in 12 markets. There's a survey in 4 countries. We've been looking at social data, lots of data points that have just come in. And so I wanted to just share some initial headlines and answer, well, 3 questions. One, will inflation's impact create new holiday traditions? As we've heard, it is impacting the way that people are shopping and when they're shopping and how they're thinking about shopping. But is it going to impact our holiday season? 2, are we in fact seeing a rush back to the store? And we've heard in some of the conversation earlier that this is really a blending of the physical and the digital world. But as countries open up, as Patrick just said, is there going to be somewhat of a rush back to physical experiences and shopping? And then we'll end with sort of a fun note. What are the top gifts and what in fact could be the top gifts in the future? So let's dig in. Yes, indeed, as we've heard, according to our survey across 12 countries, 87% say that rising costs will impact their holiday shopping. So let's see how it's impacting their holiday shopping. If we dig in a little bit, is saving money the new holiday tradition? Well, we saw this in the Ipsos Global Inflation Monitor in the summer, when a little more than a third said that they would, in fact, spend less on the holidays. And if we dig into our new survey, well, this is happening in a lot of different ways. One is 56% have said that they're going to look for the best prices and deals and coupons. Maybe that's not surprising. Maybe what's a little bit more surprising is that more than a third will spend less money on holiday decorations. And for those of us who love to see the lights and all of that, maybe this is a downside of our inflationary times, is people are going to spend less. Or maybe, per Simon's opener, maybe they're thinking about recycling and reusing their existing decorations. So maybe this is the good side of this reduction. What are people saying online? So I'm going to compare and contrast what we're seeing in our survey with what we're seeing in social media and online. And in online conversations, well, not surprisingly, when we looked over the last month or so, many are talking about inflation and how it's causing them to change holiday habits. And what you're seeing here in the visual is, in fact, what we call a topic map of clusters of conversations that our AI has gathered up and actually labeled. And we see some sort of top concerns come to the fore, right? Inflation during the holiday season is one type of conversation. I can't afford Christmas presents. That's sort of sad. That's another top conversation. The rising cost of Thanksgiving dinner, especially in English-speaking countries. But maybe the good news is, if you look at, and you can't probably see the labels, but if you squint, there's a couple of topics and clusters that emerge that show more anticipation, more excitement, willingness to get out. At the top, we have Christmas markets as one of the conversation clusters. At the bottom, we have flights during the holidays. So I think this is sort of the best of times and the worst of times because of inflation, but certainly the data on social says that people are excited even while they're concerned about high prices. As we heard earlier, some folks are actually getting out and shopping early. What's interesting is this is very dependent on the country. On average, across the 12 countries that we studied, just about 20% were already finished or almost done. If you're like me and you haven't gotten out yet, or you haven't gone online, don't worry. About 56% across these 12 countries haven't started yet. And we're even seeing in some of the verbatim data that, yes, indeed, that inflation is maybe nudging some people to get out because they're fearful that prices may go up more. So there's certainly an impact of inflation, but I'd say that overall people have not yet started, so have no fear. Number 2, back to the store. So the survey says 23% of consumers are in fact planning to increase their in-store shopping on average across the countries that we studied. I think that's not a surprise. We saw a slightly lower number last year, but people are eager to get out. And we're seeing this behavior, especially in certain categories, right? Products that consumers touch or try are still very much being purchased in store. And if I look at 3 specific categories, 65% purchased beauty gifts in store versus 59% last year. 64% purchased home gifts in store versus 58% last year, and 63% purchase fashion gifts. So it makes sense that beauty and home items and fashion are naturally purchased in store, but they're also being bought online. So this is truly convergent commerce in action, right? Where we see similar but not quite as high numbers in terms of purchases online of these items. So I think it really depends on the category. As we heard before, areas like grocery still dominated by in-store, areas like maybe electronics or purchasing tickets, mostly online. So this is definitely an omni-channel world, and it's becoming more and more a convergent world as well. If we flip over to the social view, what are we seeing in online conversations? Many say they are looking forward to returning to malls and markets and in-store experiences. Yet, if you look at the sentiment, it's mixed, right? People on one hand are dreading parking or traffic or crowds, but they're also talking about looking forward to seeing decorations and music. And even if you look at some of the individual tweets and posts here, people are talking about the music, the movies that get them in the mood. I'd say that there's anxiety this year that we see in the sentiment, but also excitement and people looking forward to getting out again. And finally, what is trending? The headline here, fashion, food, and gift cards. And I'll say again, because we saw gift cards last year as a popular item, but also that's very regional. So let's look specifically at what gifts have either been purchased or people are planning to purchase. And again, this is across the 12 markets. There's fashion and apparel, #1, and actually by quite a bit, by about 10 points over toys and games. Groceries, food, and beverages are interesting to me because last year this was #7. This year it's #4. We could say that this is maybe evidence of more practical purchases. That could be the influence of inflation or people buying food and drinks to get together with their friends. So this is, I think, an interesting data point. And then there's gift cards again, that is #6 here overall. But if you look at just the 6 countries we surveyed last year, it was both #2 in those last year and #2 this year. And there's definitely a split here. In some of the Latin countries, gift cards are viewed as much less of an acceptable gift. And I think in other countries like the US, it's quite appropriate. So it depends on where you live in terms of how people are thinking about gift cards being either the greatest gift ever or one that means that you kind of didn't care about them. So let me wrap up with a glimpse into the future. And this is one of the more interesting ways that we're using social data. So this notion of spotting early signals in that social data with techniques like topic modeling, in fact, allow us to get a little crystal ball and look into the future and say, you know, what may be in the store in the next 1 to 2 or even 3 years. And in fact, some great examples of this, I went back and said, well, what did we see 2 years ago? And so there's some examples here on the screen, but let me focus specifically on the top one. And it goes back to something that Simon said about the support for environmentally friendly products. And so we did a study looking at consumer beauty products and specifically how people were thinking about sustainable packaging. We saw early on the demand for zero waste refillables, but also we saw in those conversations a couple of years ago that the existing products were kind of unsatisfactory, right? That if they weren't durable or they broke, that could be really a deal breaker, even though people wanted to purchase something that was refillable or sustainable. And in that same study, we saw the early conversations about bamboo as possibly a solution to this need, both sustainable and durable. Fast forward to today, bamboo products, bamboo packages are everywhere. So I think it is quite possible to look at social data and get a glimpse, not into just what's happening now, but also into the future. So what will be the hot products of 2024? Definitely stay tuned. And also, if you'd like to get the full report, it comes out on December 1st. And with that, back to you, Jennifer.
Great. So we'll definitely stay tuned, Alan, but we'd like to have a little preview because you're looking at all this data. So I'm sure you have a little idea of what will be the next big thing. What should we expect? What will be the gifts?
So I'd like to think, and maybe this is because I'm a bit of a tech nerd, but I would say that in a couple of years, metaverse style experiences may actually be a thing, whether it's actually items that people are getting to redeem in their favorite metaverse platform, or actually experiences that are more a hybrid of sort of multiplayer gaming and online shopping and a mashup of that. But I think that in a couple of years, we're going to see real things happening, real money being spent in these virtual platforms. That's my prediction and my bet. But maybe because I want that to come true.
Because you want to go around with your headset and have
well, as long as they look
fun.
I think we need to work on having more fashionable headsets, but maybe that's an opportunity.
Yeah, that's true. Great. Thank you very much, Alan. And now, Simon, I think you have been busy behind the scenes looking at questions that have been coming in. And are you ready to ask a few questions to our speakers?
Yes, I am indeed. Thank you, everybody. And actually, my first question from the audience actually picks up on where Alan left off, which is about the metaverse. And it was a question for Alison. I think they spotted the reference to it in your charts, and I think in your talk. And our questioner was wondering whether the metaverse is overcooked, undercooked, or about right.
Well, I'm going to jump on your cooking metaphor here. It's definitely not cooked yet, kind of like my Thanksgiving dinner next week, but we have all the ingredients. And as we think about all the ingredients, what I mean by that is we have the technology, we have the interest, we've got the internet speed in many, many places to do that. But we're still just dabbling and just learning and trying to find the right recipe. And right now that recipe is around gaming, and that recipe is starting to be about very small purchases. Avatar decorations, clothing, lipstick for my avatar, all of these things that I'm trying to get with Alan and want that to happen. I'm not all the way there, but we're dabbling right now. And where we're going to go next is going to be a lot of advertising and marketing communications coming while folks are on in their metaverses and playing their games and engaging in activities. But where it gets really exciting from a shopping standpoint is when the metaverse becomes the point of sale. And think of it as a buy now button in the middle of your metaverse where you're socializing or gaming or doing whatever you're going to do in the metaverse. So I can see the evolution. We have work to do to get there.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Actually, just to pick up on your Thanksgiving example, actually, and to take it maybe back to the here and now, you mentioned that you were observing both in your own life, but also more generally, consumers being a bit more careful and choiceful. I think the question was. And Patrick, we had a question about China, about the mindset of consumers right now. Are you seeing people being more careful and choiceful, even in this environment where there's so much new developments in terms of the technology taking place?
Yeah, I think they're definitely more careful about what to buy, and do they want to buy it now or later. To be very honest, I think the consumer confidence right now is not very high. However, there's also the belief that everyone thinks the only reason behind it is actually the policy. And talking about when everyone's talking about inflation around the world, China's inflation is nothing. There's no inflation here. I think last month in October, our CPI was only 2.1%. So most people believe, even though with a very low confidence, most people believe when we start to restore to the normal life, then people's shopping urge will be, recovering really fast, and people will come back to work and start to buy things. So right now, not so good, but there's still a bright future ahead.
And just to pick up on that, we had a question about how people can make those choices with this very profound sort of set of changes that are taking place in terms of what we can do online. Do you have any thoughts just to help us understand better the landscape of perhaps people who might not be so savvy digitally? Is that a discussion that you're seeing taking place around making things available for everybody?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. So on one hand, I would say most people in China, even when we talk about elderly, who are above 80, or the people who are living in the most remote areas, most remote rural areas, they are, I would say, very familiar with most technologies or the new trends like live streaming, e-commerce, etc. And on the other hand, I would also have to admit that some newest technologies were adapted first in major cities. So that part of consumers were left behind a little bit. However, there is one part of e-commerce I didn't really mention in China, and that was a strong force, which is about the really low-priced products. And there is they live in a very different ecosystem. The way they push their business is by sharing and referral. And then, when you refer their products, you can get a really, really low price. And that kind of things are helping those people with maybe a shrinking purchase power, or people who are not connected with the most advanced technologies still can get really good products at a really, really low price.
Okay, well, that's so. Okay, so actually, there's a way different. Like the ecosystem includes opportunities for people to, let's say, act in a rational way and to help them get more value, even if they've got limited resources. Now, that's thank you for that. And just to pick up on the question about resources, we also had a question about the other end of the spectrum. I mean, which is more about the luxury side of things. And Alan, what do you see in your data about where people are in terms of the more higher ends of the spectrum in the holiday research you've been doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the social side, a lot of the luxury influencers, or a lot of the luxury sort of social commerce experiences are being influenced by more of the Gen Z buyers, right? We did a study on Gen Z fashion. We've looked at both the influencers, through K-pop or other media. And so I think as that generation gets more purchasing power, already does, a lot of that's being influenced by social and by social channels and by social influencers. And then it sort of tracks to even the adoption of some of these social platforms where, Facebook has become an older, more female platform. Twitter, interestingly, has become older and more male. And then there's, the emerging channels from TikTok or just starting to hear about Be Real, being more of a teen channel. So there's such a diversity of channels, but I think each of them, there is a role for both the influencers and in some cases, luxury products being sold directly through those channels, especially as people are buying like fashion based on what influencers posted on their TikTok, for example. So I think it's a demographic thing, but also it's a brands getting more savvy in how they're using these various channels.
Yeah, well, that's a good reminder for us just to be very reflective about the dynamic of the different platforms available to us, including WhatsApp, which is what we're using with the questions today. So just two final points. We're going to finish Patrick and Alison. I'll start with Patrick. You mentioned the live streaming, and that's a big change we saw since last year. Is there anything particularly we should look out for before we hear your presentation next year about the Chinese environment?
Yeah. So on the e-commerce side, I really want to bring everyone's attention to a concept called interest e-commerce. And basically, they're platforms more like Pinterest or definitely TikTok. And the logic of the sales is very different. I think it's different than traditional e-commerce. It's different than live streaming. It's basically try to get your attention to what might be interesting to you again and again and again, maybe by a series of videos or very short blogs, vlogs. And at one moment, you don't know when is the critical moment, but at one moment, they will lead you to a sales platform and make the sales. And most e-commerce platforms are believing that the next 5 years, that's because live streaming is already the trend, next 5 years, who wins the interest-based e-commerce side, who will be the winner in China's e-commerce landscape.
Thank you for that. And just to pick up on that, Alison, what should we look out for in the next year from your perspective?
So I agree with what Patrick just said. And I think if you think about interest commerce and you think about the communities that Alan referenced earlier, and you think about live streaming, they're all bringing people together in a way through technology based on some kind of common interest. I expect we're going to see that go to more experiences over the next year and for gifts next holiday season. There's no doubt the economy will continue, despite the fact that we're worried, we're not continuing to worry more, it's still not going away. And so I think we're going to be choiceful, and as we start to get out in a healthier world, we're going to want to have more group experiences and use the technology to communicate that way and sell those experiences.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for all of your observations and thoughts and comments. We will look forward to seeing what happens over the coming year. Appreciate everybody being with us today. I'm going to hand back to Jennifer just to wrap up.
Thank you very much to all our speakers and to everyone who has been with us today. We do look forward to seeing you another time this year for our last wrap up of 2022 in the year in review on December 15th. So thank you for being here and really looking forward to seeing you again on the 15th of December. Bye, everyone.
Bye.